My name is Maeve. I'm 28 years old, and until recently, I was a daughter who thought she knew what unconditional love meant. After my father died, I moved back home to support my grieving mother, both emotionally and financially. Today, I came home from a 12-hour nursing shift to find my entire life stuffed into garbage bags on our front lawn. My mother was standing in the doorway with a stranger, a man whose arm was wrapped possessively around her shoulders. If you've ever had your trust shattered by family, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join me on this journey of betrayal and redemption. Connecticut always felt like the perfect place to grow up. Our modest two-story colonial in the quiet suburb of Oakdale had been my safe haven for 18 years before I left for nursing school. The house itself wasn't anything special, white siding that needed occasional pressure, washing black shutters that my dad would repaint every few summers, and a slightly sloping front porch where we'd sit on summer evenings eating watermelon and spitting seeds into the grass. Dad. Just thinking about him creates that familiar ache in my chest. 2 years ago, pancreatic cancer took him from us far too quickly. 6 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. I still remember how the maple trees in our backyard had just started turning gold when he first became jaundiced, and by the time the leaves fell, so had he. My mother Sarah didn't handle it well. Who would? They'd been high school sweethearts married for 30 years. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was solid, comfortable, and genuine. When he died, it was like watching half of her disappear too. I was working at Memorial Hospital in Boston at the time, building my career in the pediatric intensive care unit. The distance made it hard to check on her regularly, but we talked every Sunday without fail. As the months passed, her voice on those calls became increasingly hollow. She'd forget things I'd told her the week before. Bills were going unpaid, the house was becoming neglected. After a particularly concerning call where she mentioned she didn't see the point in fixing the leaking roof, I made a decision. I'd move back home temporarily just until she got back on her feet. I could transfer to the local hospital, help with the house, and make sure she was taking care of herself. It seemed like the right thing to do. You're making a mistake, my best friend Tara warned over coffee the week before I left Boston. Moving back home in your late 20s never works out well, trust me. This is different, I insisted. She's all alone, Tara. She needs me. Tara sighed and stirred her latte. Just promise me you'll keep your boundaries intact. Don't let yourself become her emotional crutch. I dismissed her concerns. My mother had always respected my independence. We'd always gotten along well. This would be a short-term arrangement to help us both. She'd get the support she needed, and I'd save on Boston rent prices while paying down my student loans. James, my boyfriend of 2 years, was less than thrilled. We'd been talking about moving in together before Dad died. Long distance is hard enough, he said during our goodbye dinner. But you moving back to your childhood bedroom, that's regression, Maeve. It's temporary, I assured him, squeezing his hand across the table. A year tops, we'll make it work with weekend visits. He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Still, he helped me pack up my apartment and drove with me to Connecticut that Sunday in May 6 months ago. Mom seemed genuinely happy to see me that day. She'd made my favorite lasagna, opened the windows to air out the slightly musty house, and even put fresh flowers in my old bedroom. We hugged for a long time on the front porch after James drove away, and I felt certain I'd made the right choice. The first few months were healing for both of us. I took the night shift at the local hospital so I could be home during the day to help with house projects. Together, we repainted the kitchen, fixed the roof leak, and cleaned out Dad's closet, a task she couldn't face alone. We went through old photo albums and shared memories. She started attending a grief support group at the local church, and I noticed small improvements in her demeanor. She was smiling more, taking pride in her appearance again. I was contributing to the mortgage and utilities, cooking healthy meals, and handling the household admin that had fallen by the wayside. Our routine felt comfortable and purposeful. James would visit every other weekend, though the visits became more strained as time went on. He didn't understand why I needed to parent my parent, as he put it. She's an adult, Maeve. She should be taking care of herself by now, he said during one tense conversation. Grief doesn't have a timeline, I defended. She's getting better. She just needs a little more time. Looking back, I should have noticed the changes sooner. About 3 months after I moved in, Mum started receiving phone calls that would make her step outside to talk. She began having lunch with friends that would sometimes stretch into the evening. She bought new clothes, started styling her hair differently, and wore makeup more often. I was actually pleased by these developments. I interpreted them as signs that she was finally emerging from her grief, building a new social life, perhaps even reclaiming her identity beyond being a widow. I never imagined these changes would eventually lead to garbage bags on our lawn. The first time I met Walter was on a Tuesday evening in August. I'd just woken up and was having coffee before my night shift when Mum came home with a man I'd never seen before. "Maeve, this is Walter," she announced with an unusual brightness in her voice. "Walter, this is my daughter who I've told you so much about." Walter was tall and fit for a man in his mid-50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and the kind of tan that comes from recreational sailing rather than manual labour. He wore a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to showcase an expensive watch, pressed khakis and loafers that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. Everything about him screamed successful businessman. "The nurse," he said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Your mother speaks highly of your dedication." The pause before dedication was slight but noticeable, making what should have been a compliment feel vaguely condescending. "Walter and I met at church," Mum explained, though I couldn't recall the last time she'd mentioned attending services. "He's in the real estate business." "Development," Walter corrected smoothly. "I help people reimagine properties to reach their full potential." That first meeting stretched into dinner with Walter dominating the conversation. He talked extensively about his travels, his beach house in Rhode Island, and various business deals, all while asking me virtually nothing about my life or work. When I tried to join the conversation with a story about a patient, he nodded politely before quickly steering the topic back to himself. Mum, meanwhile, hung on his every word. She laughed at all his jokes, touched his arm frequently, and kept looking at him with an expression I hadn't seen in years. It was disconcerting to witness, like watching an actress play the role of my mother. As I was leaving for my shift, I overheard Walter in the kitchen saying, "Sarah, you really should consider updating this place. These cabinets are at least 20 years old." "They are a bit dated," she agreed, though she and Dad had deliberately chosen those cabinets together, and she'd always loved their warm cherry finish. Later that week, I found Mum cleaning out the garage. "Walter thinks we should turn this into a proper gym space," she explained when I asked what she was doing with Dad's workbench. "But Dad built that," I said, watching her dismantle the solid oak structure where he'd taught me to use tools. "It's taking up too much space, honey, and it's just gathering dust now." Over the next few weeks, Walter became a regular presence in our home. Each visit seemed to bring a new suggestion for improvement. The family photos in the hallway were cluttering the space. The comfortable old sofa where Dad used to nap was bringing down the aesthetic. The vegetable garden I'd helped Mum revive was too much maintenance. Disturbingly, Mum began parroting his opinions, often word for word. She started criticizing aspects of the house she'd previously loved. Her personality seemed to shift in subtle ways. She became more concerned with appearances, more judgmental of others, less patient. She also became increasingly critical of me. My hours were disrupting the household. My habit of reading in the living room was making a mess. My meal prep containers in the fridge were taking up too much space. I tried harder. I became neater, quieter, more accommodating. I deep cleaned the bathroom every other day. I prepared special Sunday brunches. I offered to increase my financial contribution to the household. Nothing seemed to satisfy her anymore. The closer she grew to Walter, the more distant she became with me. One night, I came home to find some of Dad's books missing from the shelves. "Where are Dad's aviation books?" I asked. "Oh, Walter's interested in flying. I thought he might enjoy them," she replied casually. When I expressed my discomfort, she snapped, "They were just collecting dust, Maeve. Your father would want them to be used and appreciated." I confided my concerns to Tara during our weekly phone call. "This sounds like classic manipulation," she said. "This guy shows up and suddenly your mom is changing everything about her home and herself, red flags everywhere." "She's an adult," I said, echoing James's words about her. "Maybe she's just finally moving on." "There's moving on and then there's erasing your past. Just be careful, Maeve. People can be vulnerable after loss." I wanted to believe this relationship was healthy, that Mum had simply found companionship again, but the knot in my stomach grew tighter with each passing day. September brought cooler temperatures and a noticeable chill in my relationship with Mum. Walter was staying overnight with increasing frequency, making the house feel crowded and tense. I'd come home from my shift to find them having coffee in the kitchen, their conversation abruptly halting when I entered. One afternoon, I woke to the sound of furniture being moved. I found my childhood bedroom half emptied, with Mum directing 2 delivery men who were assembling a new desk where my bookshelf had stood. "What's happening?" I asked, still groggy from sleep. We're updating the guest room, Mum replied, not meeting my eyes. This isn't the guest room, this is my room, I said, confusion giving way to hurt. Well, you're not going to be here forever, honey. Walter thinks we should make this space more functional as a home office. Walter thinks... Since when does Walter make decisions about our house? She straightened, her expression hardening. He has excellent taste and experience with home design. Besides, you're nearly 30. Don't you think it's time you had your own place again? The conversation devolved into our first real argument since I'd moved back. I felt blindsided and disrespected. This was still my home too, at least temporarily, and I was contributing financially to its upkeep. Mum accused me of being childish and ungrateful, saying I was resistant to positive changes. The following weekend, I noticed Dad's watch was missing from the small cedar box where Mum had kept it on her dresser. It was a vintage Omega Seamaster that had belonged to his father, before him, one of the few valuable items he'd owned and something he'd worn every day of his adult life. "Where's Dad's watch?" I asked during an already tense breakfast. Mum stirred her coffee longer than necessary. I gave it to Walter as a gift. The room seemed to tilt sideways. "You gave away Dad's watch to a man you've known for 2 months?" "It's been almost 3 months," she corrected, as if that made a significant difference. "And the watch was just sitting in a box. Walter appreciates fine timepieces. That watch was supposed to stay in our family. Dad would have wanted me to have it someday." "Your father would want me to be happy," she snapped. "Walter makes me happy." That evening, while Mum was out with Walter, I did something I'd never done before. I searched his name online. What I found was troubling. Walter Harrington had a pattern of relationships with recently widowed women in affluent communities. There were mentions of a lawsuit from 5 years ago, something about misappropriation of funds that was settled out of court. His real estate development business had several complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau. When I gently tried to share my concerns with Mum, she exploded. "You're jealous. You can't stand to see me happy with someone else. You'd rather I stay lonely and grieving forever so you can play the role of my savior." "Mum, that's not true. I'm worried about you. Some of the things I've found about Walter." "Stop it. You've always been jealous when I give attention to anyone else. Even as a child. Walter warned me you might try to come between us." Her words stung like a physical slap. He had clearly been poisoning her against me, creating a narrative where my concerns came from jealousy rather than love. The situation deteriorated rapidly after that confrontation. Walter began openly making decisions about the house without consulting me. My workspace at the dining table was cleared away one day because it cluttered the entertaining area. The refrigerator was suddenly filled with expensive foods I was implicitly not welcome to share. The thermostat was set to a temperature that left me shivering through the night because energy costs are through the roof. Small personal items began disappearing or being damaged. A framed photo of Dad and me fishing appeared with a cracked glass. My collection of nursing textbooks was accidentally donated during a cleaning spree. My grandmother's ceramic bowl was unfortunately broken during kitchen reorganization. Each incident was minor enough to be explained away, yet the pattern was unmistakable. I was being erased from the home, one possession at a time. The final straw came when I discovered papers in the printer tray documents for a second mortgage on the house. Mum had refinanced the nearly paid-off home that Dad had worked so hard to secure for our family. When confronted, she dismissed my concerns. "The money is for renovations Walter is helping me plan. This place has so much untapped potential." Mum, taking on debt at your age. My age, I'm 53, not 80. And frankly, my financial decisions are none of your business. It becomes my business when it affects my future too. Dad wanted this house to stay in the family. She laughed, a cold, unfamiliar sound. "You mean he wanted you to inherit it? Is that what this is really about? Your inheritance?" I went to work that night with tears blurring my vision, wondering how things had gone so terribly wrong. October 17th started like any other Wednesday. I worked a particularly challenging shift in the pediatric ward, dealing with a car accident that brought in 3 critically injured children. By the time my shift ended at 7 in the morning, I was emotionally and physically drained. Mum had texted me several times during my shift, 15 p.m. "Can you pick up milk on your way home?" to 37 p.m. "Don't forget we have that plumber coming at noon." 6:22 a.m. "Have a good end of shift, honey." The messages seemed so normal, so ordinary. Nothing hinted at what was waiting for me. I stopped for milk as requested and picked up cinnamon rolls as a peace offering. Despite our arguments, I still wanted to repair our relationship. The morning was crisp and clear with autumn leaves crunching under my tires as I pulled into our driveway. At first I thought someone was having a yard sale. Black garbage bags were arranged in neat rows on our front lawn. A few boxes sat beside them. It wasn't until I noticed my nurse's clogs poking out from one partially open bag that comprehension dawned. Those were my things. All of my things. Mum stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Walter stood beside her, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders. His other hand rested casually in the pocket of his expensive slacks, and I could see the gleam of my father's watch on his wrist. "What's happening?" I asked, though the scene told me everything I needed to know. Mum stepped forward, her face set in an expression I'd never seen before, resolved remote, almost businesslike. "Maeve Walter has asked me to marry him," she said, holding up her left hand, where a large diamond caught the morning light. "We're starting our new life together, and we need the space." I stood frozen, the grocery bag dangling from my hand. "You're kicking me out just like that." Walter spoke up, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "Sarah and I feel it's best for everyone. You're a grown woman who needs her independence, and we need to establish our household without complications." "Mom," I looked past him, searching her face for any sign of the woman who had raised me, who had kissed my scraped knees and stayed up all night when I had fevers. "It's time, Maeve," she said flatly. "Walter needs the second bedroom for his home office, and frankly, having you here has been holding me back from moving forward. I've put your life on hold for you for too long. It's time for you to grow up." "Holding you back," my voice cracked. "I came here to help you. I've been paying bills, fixing the house, supporting you emotionally. And I'm grateful," she said in a tone that conveyed anything but gratitude. "But Walter and I need our privacy now." Walter checked his watch, my father's watch, with exaggerated impatience. "We've given you until noon to collect your things. After that, we're changing the locks." "Noon? That's less than 4 hours from now. Where am I supposed to go?" "You're resourceful," Walter said with a dismissive wave. "I'm sure you'll figure something out. Most of your generation does eventually." As the shock began to wear off, anger rose to take its place. "How long have you been planning this?" Mum at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "Walter proposed last week. We decided it would be easier this way rather than having a drawn-out transition." "Easier for whom?" I asked, tears now flowing freely. "You couldn't even give me notice, a chance to find a place, some warning." "Drama won't change anything," Walter said coldly. "Sarah has made her choice." Those words hit me like physical blows. Sarah has made her choice. And her choice wasn't me, it was him. Neighbours were beginning to peek out their windows at the scene unfolding on our lawn. The humiliation burned almost as much as the betrayal. Mrs. Parker from next door was watching openly from her porch, concern etched on her kind face. I turned back to my mother, searching for any sign of the woman who had lovingly packed my lunches throughout school, who had held me when my first boyfriend broke my heart, who had beamed with pride at my nursing school graduation. "Is this really what you want?" I asked quietly. "Yes," she said, but her eyes dropped to the ground. "I deserve happiness, Maeve. Walter is my second chance." "And I'm what collateral damage?" Walter stepped forward. "This emotional manipulation isn't helping anyone. Your mother has made her decision. Now I suggest you start loading your car if you want to get everything before noon." As if to emphasize his point, he guided my mother back inside and firmly closed the door, leaving me alone on the lawn with the scattered remains of my life in garbage bags. I sat in my car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, trying to process what had just happened. My childhood home. The house where I'd taken my first steps, lost my first tooth, grieved my father, was no longer my home. My mother had chosen a man she barely knew over her own daughter. Everything I owned was stuffed into garbage bags like trash. The magnitude of the betrayal felt physical, like someone had hollowed out my chest with a spoon. My phone buzzed Tara, responding to the desperate text I'd sent her. "OMG. Stay there. I'm coming. You can stay with me as long as you need." Tara lived 40 minutes away, which meant I had to somehow contain my emotional breakdown while figuring out how to transport everything I owned. I stepped out of the car on shaky legs and began assessing the situation. Some of my belongings wouldn't fit in my modest sedan. My small desk, the bookshelf Dad had built for my 16th birthday, my nursing school trunk. I'd have to leave them behind or find another solution. As I began loading the garbage bags into my car, Mrs. Parker came over her face creased with concern. "Maeve, honey, what's happening? Can I help?" The kindness in her voice nearly broke me again. "My mom, she's asked me to move out. Today with no notice." Her expression shifted from concern to outrage. Because of that man she's been seeing, I nodded, unable to form words around the lump in my throat. "This isn't right," she declared. "Let me call my son. He has a pickup truck. We can store some things in our garage until you figure things out." Her simple act of neighbourly kindness released the dam, and I began sobbing in earnest. Mrs. Parker, who had known me since I was in diapers, pulled me into a hug and let me cry against her shoulder. With Mrs. Parker's help, I began systematically loading my car. As I worked, I realised certain items were missing from the bags. The jewellery box my father had given me for my 18th birthday, the photo albums from my childhood, my grandmother's quilt. When Mrs. Parker's son arrived with his truck, I gathered my courage and approached the front door. After several knocks, Walter answered, his expression impatient. "There are some family items missing," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "My jewellery box, photo albums, grandmother's quilt." "Sarah decided to keep certain family heirlooms back," he replied. "After all, this is still her house. Those things were given to me." "They're mine." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Do you have receipts?" Before I could respond, Mum appeared behind him. "The quilt stays with the family home, Maeve, and I'm keeping the albums and jewellery box safe." "Safe from what? From me?" She didn't answer, just retreated back into the house. Walter began to close the door. "Can I at least say goodbye properly?" I asked. "I think it's better this way," he said. "Clean break." The door clicked shut. Mrs. Parker's son helped me load the remaining items into his truck. By 11:30, everything that was permitted to leave the house was packed up. I stood on the lawn one last time, looking at the home where I'd spent the first 18 years of my life, where I'd returned to help my grieving mother, where I was now no longer welcome. I drove to Tara's apartment in a fog of disbelief and pain, following her car after she came to meet me. When we arrived, she helped me bring the first bags up to her second-floor apartment. "I can't believe she did this to you," Tara said as we unloaded. "After everything you've done for her." Her small one-bedroom apartment quickly became crowded with my possessions. She cleared space in her closet, emptied a dresser drawer, and made up the couch with clean sheets. "It's not much," she apologized, "but it's yours for as long as you need it." That first night on Tara's couch sleep was impossible. I kept replaying the events of the day, searching for warning signs I might have missed, ways I could have prevented this outcome. I checked my phone constantly, part of me still expecting Mum to call or text to say she'd made a terrible mistake to ask me to come home. No call came. For the first time in my professional life, I called in sick to work the next day. The thought of caring for others when I could barely function myself seemed impossible. I spent the day in a state of numbness, staring at walls and occasionally breaking into unexpected tears. "You need to eat something," Tara insisted that evening, placing a sandwich next to me. "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway. Nurse's orders." I managed a few bites to please her, though the food tasted like cardboard. That night I tried calling Mum. The call went straight to voicemail. I sent a text. "Can we please talk?" It showed as delivered but went unanswered. The next day I discovered she'd blocked me on Facebook. The digital severing hurt almost as much as the physical eviction. She was systematically removing me from every aspect of her life. James called after hearing what happened from Tara. "That's rough," he said, his tone sympathetic but distant. "But honestly, Maeve, I warned you about moving back home." "You're saying this is my fault?" I asked, incredulous. "No, not your fault, but not completely unexpected either. Parents have their own lives. You can't expect to be their priority forever." She threw my things in garbage bags and gave me 4 hours to vacate James. "That's not having her own life. That's cruel." His sigh was audible through the phone. "Look, I know you're upset, but maybe this is a blessing in disguise. Now you can move forward too. Maybe come back to Boston." His response made it clear he didn't understand, or didn't want to understand, the depth of the betrayal I'd experienced. We argued with him, suggesting I was overreacting, and me feeling increasingly isolated in my pain. "When you calm down and start thinking rationally again, call me," he said finally. I didn't call him back. Some bridges once burned aren't worth rebuilding. By the end of the first week of displacement, the shock had given way to a hollow depression. I returned to work going through the motions of caring for my pediatric patients while feeling completely empty inside. I was sleeping on a friend's couch, living out of garbage bags, and effectively orphaned at 28 years old. The financial reality of my situation added another layer of stress. I had savings, but not enough for first and last month's rent, plus security deposit in our expensive area. Most of my extra income had been going toward the mortgage and renovations at Mum's house investments I would never recoup. I felt lost in every sense of the word. Without my childhood home as an anchor, without my mother's love as a certainty, I didn't know who I was anymore. 2 weeks after being displaced, I was still living out of garbage bags at Tara's apartment. I'd returned to work finding solace in the structured environment of the hospital and the clear purpose of caring for sick children. My colleagues had been understanding, covering shifts when I needed time for apartment hunting and offering emotional support. I was in the hospital cafeteria listlessly picking at a salad when someone called my name. I looked up to see my Aunt Diane, my mother's older sister, standing there with a tray. "I thought that was you," she said, sitting down across from me without waiting for an invitation. "You look terrible." Aunt Diane had never been one to sugarcoat things. She lived 2 hours away and wasn't a regular presence in our lives, though she'd always sent birthday cards and made appearances at major holidays. "Thanks," I replied dryly. "It's been a rough few weeks." "So I've heard." She stabbed at her pasta salad with a fork. "Your mother isn't returning my calls either." This caught my attention. "She's not talking to you," Diane shook her head. "Not since I questioned her about this Walter character. Apparently expressing concern about marrying someone after 3 months makes me judgmental and stuck in the past." A small flame of validation flickered in my chest. "So it's not just me." "Not by a long shot. She's stopped talking to most of the family. Even her church friends are getting the cold shoulder. This isn't like Sarah at all." Over the next hour, Aunt Diane and I compared notes. She had met Walter once and had immediately disliked him, his controlling behavior, the way he answered questions directed at my mother, how he had subtly belittled her in front of family. "He's isolating her," Diane said bluntly. "Classic manipulator move. Cut the person off from their support network so they become dependent on you." She also shared something that made my blood run cold. Walter had a history of similar behavior. Her friend in Rhode Island knew a woman who had briefly been involved with him after her husband died. He had moved in quickly, gained access to her finances, and then disappeared when the money was gone. "Have you told Mum this?" I asked. "Tried to. She accused me of making up stories because I was jealous of her happiness." Sound familiar? It did, almost word for word what she had said to me. That conversation with Aunt Diane marked a turning point. Instead of just feeling victimized, I began to see the situation more clearly. My mother was being manipulated by a predator who targeted vulnerable widows. While her treatment of me was inexcusable, I could understand it as part of a larger pattern of manipulation. The next day, I consulted with a lawyer about my rights regarding the house. To my surprise, the attorney found that my father's will had left the house jointly to my mother and me, with her having lifetime rights, and my portion to be fully vested upon her death or remarriage. "If she marries this Walter person," the lawyer explained, "you would legally own half the house." Armed with this knowledge and Diane's support, I began to develop a plan. We would gather evidence of Walter's past behavior, document the questionable financial decisions, and try to help my mother see the truth before it was too late. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my own life. With help from a hospital social worker, I found a small efficiency apartment I could afford. The elderly landlord, Mr. Giannopoulos, was moved by my situation and waived the security deposit when he learned I was a nurse at the Children's Hospital, where his grandson had been treated years ago. "Good people deserve good things," he said, handing me the keys. "Take your time with the first month's rent. Get settled first." His kindness, along with the support from colleagues who organised donations of kitchen essentials and furniture, began to heal something in me. For every person who had let me down there seemed to be 2 more willing to lift me up. I began attending therapy sessions at a community centre, working through my feelings of abandonment and betrayal. The therapist helped me recognise that while I couldn't control my mother's choices, I could control my response to them. "Your worth isn't determined by her ability to see it," the therapist told me during one particularly difficult session. "And forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to hurt you again." Those words became my mantra as I slowly rebuilt my sense of self-worth. One evening, I received a message from Carol, my mother's oldest friend since college. They had been inseparable for decades until recently. "I'm worried about Sarah," the message read. "She's not herself. Walter has convinced her to put the house on the market. She's talking about moving to Florida with him once they're married. This isn't the Sarah I know." That was the final piece we needed. Mum was planning to sell the house that was half mine according to Dad's will. With Aunt Diane Carroll and a few other longtime family friends, we organised an intervention. 3 days later, I stood on the porch of what had once been my home, heart pounding in my chest. Beside me stood Aunt Diane Carroll, my father's brother, Uncle Jim, and Mrs. Parker. We had agreed to present a united front, people who had known and loved Mum for decades, people whose judgment she had once trusted. Walter's car wasn't in the driveway, which was part of our plan. Carol had confirmed he would be at a real estate convention in Hartford that day. When Mum opened the door, her expression shifted from surprise to wariness to anger in rapid succession. "What is this?" she demanded, not opening the door fully. "We need to talk, Sarah," Diane said firmly. "All of us together. It's important. If this is some kind of ambush about Walter..." "It's about protecting you," I interjected. "And the legacy Dad wanted to leave for both of us." Something in my voice must have reached her because she hesitated, then reluctantly stepped back to let us in. The house had changed in the month since I'd been evicted. The warm, comfortable space had been transformed into something that resembled a furniture showroom, impersonal, coldly elegant, and sterile. Dad's recliner was gone, replaced by a leather armchair that looked expensive and uncomfortable. The walls had been repainted in a stark white that made the space feel like a hospital. We gathered in the living room. Mum remained standing, arms crossed defensively. "You have 15 minutes, she said. "Then I'm calling Walter." Uncle Jim started, his gentle voice perfect for the task. "Sarah, we've known you for 30 years. We love David and we love you. We're here because we're concerned about the speed of these changes in your life." "I'm entitled to happiness," she responded automatically, as if reading from a script. "David would want that for me." "He would," I agreed. "But he also wanted security for you, for us." I produced the copy of Dad's will that the lawyer had provided. "Did you know that Dad left half of this house to me, that it becomes fully mine upon your remarriage?" She blinked, genuine confusion crossing her face. "That's not possible. Walter reviewed all the paperwork. He said the house is fully mine." Carol leaned forward. "Has Walter been handling your legal affairs?" Mum nodded slowly. "He has experience with estate planning. He said it would save me money to not hire another lawyer." Aunt Diane pulled out a folder. "We've brought some information about Walter that you need to see. Police reports from Rhode Island, complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau, statements from other widows." Mum began to protest, but Mrs. Parker cut in with her no-nonsense manner. "Sarah Ellis, I've known you since Maeve was in diapers. You are a smart, kind woman who would never throw her daughter's belongings onto the front lawn in garbage bags. That's not you. That's someone else's influence." For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across my mother's face. Over the next hour, well beyond the 15 minutes she had allotted us, we presented the evidence we had gathered. The pattern was clear and damning. Walter Harrington targeted wealthy widows, isolated them from family and friends, gained control of their assets, and then moved on, leaving emotional and financial devastation in his wake. Mum listened silently, her face growing paler with each new revelation. "He's been helping me update my will," she said finally, her voice small. "He suggested I leave everything to him with provisions for him to determine what you might receive later." The implications of that statement hung heavy in the room. "Sarah," Uncle Jim said gently, "where are your important documents kept? Your will, property deeds, bank statements?" "In the safe in the office. Walter has the combination." He exchanged glances with Diane. "Maybe we should check those now." Mum hesitated, then nodded. We followed her to the home office, formerly my bedroom, which had been transformed into a sleek workspace. The safe was hidden behind a new abstract painting. With trembling fingers, Mum entered the combination. Inside, we found far fewer documents than there should have been. "Where's the original copy of Dad's will?" I asked. Mum frowned. "It should be here, along with the house deed and my life insurance policy." We searched the office thoroughly, finding nothing. Mum's bewilderment seemed genuine, her distress growing by the minute. "I don't understand," she kept saying. "Walter said he was organising everything for me, making it simpler." Just as we were processing this disturbing discovery, we heard the front door open. Walter's voice called out, "Sarah, I'm back early, sweetheart." The room froze. This wasn't part of our plan. Walter appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with a quick, calculating glance. His charming smile vanished when he saw the open safe and the papers spread across the desk. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Before anyone could respond, his gaze locked on me. "You. I should have known you wouldn't respect your mother's wishes. Always the dramatic one, aren't you?" "We're having a family discussion," Aunt Diane said, stepping forward. Walter's expression darkened. "Sarah doesn't need your interference in our lives. Any of you." "I think she does," I countered. especially when it comes to missing documents and changing wills. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes, quickly masked. He turned to Mum, his voice softening to the persuasive tone I'd heard him use countless times. "Sarah, honey, I came home early to surprise you. I've booked us a weekend at that bed and breakfast in Vermont you mentioned. We should start packing." It was a transparent attempt to remove her from this confrontation, but for a moment I feared it might work. Mum had been so thoroughly under his influence. To my immense relief, she didn't move toward him. "Walter," she said quietly, "where is my husband's will and the deed to this house?" His expression didn't change, but I noticed his posture stiffen slightly. "In safekeeping with all your important papers. You know that." "Safekeeping where?" she pressed. "They should be in this safe." "I had them properly filed with my attorney," he said smoothly. "Much more secure than a home safe anyone could crack." Uncle Jim stepped forward. "Strange that you would do that without Sarah's knowledge or permission." "I didn't need permission." Walter snapped, his mask slipping. "Sarah and I are engaged. What's hers is mine." The baldness of the statement hung in the air. Even Mum seemed taken aback by it. "No," she said, the word barely audible. "It isn't." Walter's gaze snapped to her. "What did you say?" Mum straightened her shoulders, something of her old self returning to her posture. "I said no, Walter. My assets aren't yours. Not unless we're married, and even then there are legal protections." He stared at her for a moment, then laughed, a cold sound devoid of humour. "Is this really how you want to do this, Sarah? Turn your back on everything I've done for you, on our future together, because your daughter and these people filled your head with nonsense." "It's not nonsense if it's true," she replied. "Is it true, Walter? Have you done this before, used women when they were vulnerable?" His expression hardened. "You weren't complaining when I helped you rediscover your self-worth, when I showed you life could be good again, when I gave you a purpose beyond being a pathetic widow clinging to the past." The cruelty of his words seemed to shock even him, as if he hadn't meant to reveal so much of his true nature so quickly. But the damage was done. Mum flinched as if she'd been slapped, but she didn't back down. "I'd like you to leave now, return my documents and leave my house." "Your house?" Walter's laugh was ugly. "This house is as good as sold, Sarah. I've already got buyers lined up. We have a contract." "A contract I never signed," she retorted, growing stronger with each exchange. "Your signature is on it," he said coldly. The implication silenced the room. Had he forged her signature? Based on his expression, I believed he had. Walter seemed to realize he'd said too much. He shifted tactics, his voice becoming reasonable again. "Look, we're all upset. Let's take a step back. Sarah and I can discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," my mum interrupted. "I want you to leave, now, or I'll call the police." For a tense moment, I thought he might refuse. His face contorted with barely suppressed rage, all pretense of the charming businessman abandoned. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "All of you." His eyes swept the room before landing on Mum. "Especially you, Sarah." Then with a final glare at me, he turned and walked out. We listened as his footsteps crossed the entry hall, followed by the slam of the front door and the screech of tires in the driveway. The room remained silent for several moments after his departure. Then Mum sank into the desk chair, her body suddenly looking small and frail. "What have I done?" she whispered. "What was I thinking?" I knelt beside her chair, tentatively placing my hand over hers. "You were grieving." He took advantage of that. Tears began streaming down her face. "I threw you out. My own daughter. I put garbage bags on the lawn. Oh God, Maeve, what kind of person does that?" "A person who was being manipulated," Aunt Diane said firmly. "But now we need to act quickly. If Walter has access to your accounts or documents, we need to protect you immediately." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Uncle Jim helped Mum call the bank to freeze her accounts and credit cards. Aunt Diane contacted a locksmith to change the locks. Carol stayed by Mum's side, providing emotional support as the reality of her situation sank in. I found myself in the strange position of helping secure the house that had rejected me. As I moved through the spaces that had once been my home, I felt a complex mixture of relief, vindication, and lingering hurt. When the immediate security concerns had been addressed, Mum approached me in the kitchen where I was making tea for everyone. "Maeve," she began, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to begin to apologize." I kept my eyes on the kettle. "You don't have to do this now." "I do," she insisted. "What I did was unforgivable. I chose a stranger over my own daughter." I let him convince me you were the problem when you were the only one truly looking out for me. The raw pain in her voice finally made me turn to face her. I was so lost after your father died. She continued, tears flowing freely. Walter made me feel alive again. He made me feel like I was more than just a widow, more than just a mother. He made me feel seen. I understand that, I said quietly. I really do. You deserve to feel those things. But not at the cost of hurting you. Never that. She reached for my hand. Please come home, Maeve. This is your house too. We can fix this. The offer caught me off guard. Part of me longed to say yes to reclaim my place in this house filled with memories of Dad, to pretend the past month had never happened. But another part, the part that had been forced to grow stronger through this ordeal, knew that wasn't the right path. I can't, I said gently. I have my own place now. I need to build my own life. Tess, disappointment flashed across her face, but she nodded in understanding. Of course, I miss you so much, Maeve. I didn't realize how much until today. We can rebuild our relationship, I assured her. But it needs to be different than before, healthier, with boundaries. Boundaries, she repeated as if testing the word. Yes, I'd like that. In that moment, standing in the kitchen that had witnessed so many family meals and conversations, I felt the first real stirrings of forgiveness. Not forgetting, not excusing, but the beginning of understanding and healing. 6 months after the day I found my belongings in garbage bags, my life had taken shape in ways I couldn't have imagined. My efficiency apartment, while small, had become a true home. I'd painted the walls a soft blue that reminded me of the ocean where Dad had taught me to swim. Bookshelves lined one wall filled with nursing text and the fiction I loved. A comfortable armchair sat by the window, a housewarming gift from my hospital colleagues. The relationship with my mother was healing slowly, thoughtfully. We started with weekly coffee dates on neutral ground, a cafe halfway between our homes. Those first meetings were awkward, filled with careful conversation and lingering pain, but gradually we began to rebuild trust. She had joined a different support group for widows, one focused on avoiding financial exploitation. The stories she heard there helped her understand how common her experience had been, which eased some of her shame. With the help of a proper lawyer, she had recovered most of the documents Walter had taken, though her savings had been significantly depleted. Walter himself faced legal consequences after several of his victims, including Mum, filed police reports. The investigation revealed a pattern of elder fraud and identity theft spanning 3 states. He would likely serve prison time for his crimes. Aunt Diane had become a more regular presence in both our lives. Our shared experience bringing Mum back from Walter's influence had created a stronger bond between us. She had a blunt wisdom I appreciated, often telling me, "Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not the person who hurt you. Don't rush it, but don't block it either." My relationship with James never recovered, but I didn't mourn its loss. Through therapy, I recognized that his dismissal of my pain revealed fundamental incompatibilities between us. I deserved someone who would support me through crisis, not someone who would say, "I told you so." I'd received a promotion at the hospital, moving to a leadership role in the pediatric department. The work continued to fulfill me, perhaps even more so now that I understood firsthand how quickly life could change, how precious family connections were. On a warm spring evening, Mum came to my apartment for dinner for the first time. I watched her take in the space I'd created for myself, noting the photos of Dad I'd displayed prominently on my desk. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. "So perfectly you." We sat on my small balcony eating pasta and watching the sunset. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in months. "I've been thinking about the house," she said as we cleared the dishes. "It's too big for just me." I tensed slightly, wondering where this was headed. "I'm not selling it," she clarified quickly, noting my expression. "It's our family home, but I'm thinking of converting part of it to a rental unit. The basement could be a nice apartment with some work." "That sounds practical," I said, relieved. "Good income too," she nodded. "And I've updated my will properly this time. The house will be yours eventually, as Dad wanted. But Maeve, I want you to know something important." "What's that?" "Your worth was never tied to that house, or to me, or to anything external. Your father and I always saw your true value, your compassion, your determination, your heart. I lost sight of that for a while, but I never stopped loving you. Not really." The words washed over me like a healing balm. They didn't erase the hurt of the past, but they helped soothe its lingering sting. "I know," I said softly, "and I never stopped loving you either." Even when I was angriest, even when I felt most betrayed, there was always love underneath. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" Looking at her, really seeing her as she was now, not as the woman who had rejected me or the mother I had idealized throughout childhood, I felt a profound sense of peace. "Yes," I answered truthfully. "We're going to be okay. Different, but okay." After she left, I stood on my balcony watching the stars emerge. The painful journey of the past year had taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, boundaries, and self-worth. I'd learnt that sometimes the people we love most can hurt us deeply, yet that doesn't necessarily diminish the love itself. I'd discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, and found community in unexpected places. Most importantly, I'd learnt that home isn't always a physical place, with walls and a roof. Sometimes it's simply the space we create within ourselves, a space of self-acceptance, boundaries and peace that no one can take away, not even the people who wants to find home for us. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that forced you to redefine your understanding of family, or had to create boundaries with someone you love? Share your story in the comments below. Your experiences might help others feeling lost or betrayed know they're not alone. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to join our community of healing and growth. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most necessary beginnings. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength on yours.